We open to what I presume is the Utopia Planitia shipyards of Mars, where one of the docked vessels looks familiar. Janeway, sporting a distinctly Season 1 hairdo, teleports over and is shown round by an admiral. We're in prequel territory as Janeway says she's familiar with the ship from schematics, and once in her undecorated ready room we discuss Tuvok not reporting in from his placement on Chakotay's ship in the Badlands. Back to the bridge for some more poking, where Janeway asks a worker to move. The worker in question does so to reveal that she's an unborged 7 of 9, meaning we're probably in holodeck or time travel country. She moves to the briefing room and, using a distinctly un-Federation tool, at least from the era we know, tells someone on the other end of it that she hasn't found what she's looking for, in this case a weapon of some sort. Janeway interrupts, and after a brief interaction, Seven manages to scarp her while Janeway and the Admiral go through the other door. The one that I previously pointed out only goes to toilets and a sewage tank. Perhaps it's a particularly thorough inspection. Seven's search takes her to engineering, where we meet with our old friend Lieutenant Brokennose, the guy B'Elanna fucked up back in Season 1 because he was being a dick. Seven manages to get rid of him and resume her search, ducking into a side room and entering the Jeffries tubes. She pulls out that gizmo and tells the guy on the other end that she's found the temporal wibbly, confirming that we're in a time travel story. If we're lucky, maybe it won't have been erased by the end credits, wasting 45 minutes of my life. She tells whoever she's talking to that the wibbly is on Deck 4, begging the question of why she entered the tubes down on Deck 11 in engineering, but let's ignore that for now. She opens a panel and we see, through her eyes, a colour shift suggesting that despite not being visible, she still has her Borg augmentations. Borgmentations? Whatever. What she sees and what we see through the camera don't match up, so I suspect we're going to hear the word phase at some point. Seven's fiddling is noticed in engineering, where Lieutenant Brokennose tells Janeway that a relay just broke down. She decides to fix it herself and goes to the same door Seven went through, which is 7 decks below the problem. Maybe she wants the scenic route. Back to Seven, who tells her associate that the weapon is out of phase. That door in engineering has defeated Janeway, as it's been locked from the inside. The Admiral thinks that's a bit off, as we're not in a secured area. Frankly, if the bits that can blow up the ship aren't considered off-limits, then why bother having any? Anywho, Janeway detects some time wibblies behind the door, and the Admiral tells security to seal Deck 4. Did we move engineering? An alarm on Seven's gizmo tells her she's been rumbled, so she pops the cover back on and gets ready to scarp her, but the voice tells her there's too much interference from the time bomb. Janeway's decided this door can go fuck itself, and instead goes to enter the Jeffries tubes from a different point. Time to meet the voice on the other end of the gizmo, and we see some familiar comm badges. They're the ones worn by time-travelling dickbag Captain Braxton, who tried to murderize Voyager back in Season 3. First time round, anyway. Second time he was fine with us. That's time travel for you, innit? This one's got a whole crew with him, one of whom he tells to pull Seven back. The underling thinks this is super dangerous, but not Braxton thinks leaving her there any longer will arse up the timeline, as Janeway will catch her. Janeway arrives where Seven was to find a whole lot of nothing. That's because Seven is being brought back to a time teleporter on Not Braxton's ship. Then she carks it. Underling goes over to confirm that she's done a dead, as Not Braxton wonders how he's going to spin this in his report. Not Braxton's at a control panel when Underling enters. Attempts to revive Seven failed, and from the sounds of things, it's not the first time these pricks have killed her. Not Braxton says they'll have to recruit her again, causing Underling to question the decision. This will be the 4th time, and it could bollocks up her brain in a few different ways. The alternative is her dying when Voyager is destroyed, which is apparently a thing that's going to happen as a result of someone cocking around with history. Presumably that's why there was a time bomb on prequel Voyager. Either way, Not Braxton thinks she's the one for the job, so off we go to grab her again. Seven's having some health issues, which is to be expected for someone who's already died multiple times today. Or before today, I suppose, if we're being specific. Anywho, her eyesight is a bit wonky, and she tells the doc she's checked the database and diagnosed it. As the condition she thinks she's got hasn't been seen in centuries, the doc gives his opinion instead, then cures her, while recommending against self-diagnosis in the future. And illness seems to be the theme of the day. As Seven walks down a corridor, Paris tries to invite her to a ping-pong doubles match as his partner has developed space sickness. Up in sick bay, Janeway's showing symptoms of the same, and the doc tells us that makes 3 in total. It could be natural, of course, but the ping-pong game suggests otherwise, what with the ball stopping in mid-air and all. Seven grabs a tricorder and uses the word temporal, just in case you forgot this was a time travel episode, before it resumes to the confusion of the crowd. As an aside, I hope Neelix was recording that as a point for B'Elanna and Kim. Paris somehow managed to commit no fewer than 3 different fouls when he made that shot, which is impressive, even for a dick. Time for astrometrics, so we can use big screen mode. Voyager has time wibblies popping up all over, but the source seems to be a certain area on Deck 4. Whether that's our Deck 4 or the one that had engineering on it, I'm not sure. There's one thing we do know, though. If we don't stop this, Voyager's in deep shit, and that shit will drown us in about 2 hours. That's if the sickness doesn't drown us first. We have 37 cases now, and Neelix calls the doc to report one more in the mess hall. The doc hands treatment duties over to whoever the fuck this guy is, before grabbing his mobile emitter. He arrives in the mess hall to a confused Neelix. He didn't call for the doctor, and the guy we heard was ill is over there, sitting at a table. He promptly collapses, which doesn't match the phrase violently ill that presumably future Neelix used a moment ago, but maybe violently ill wouldn't qualify as family viewing. The doc works out what's happening, namely that Voyager has multiple different time zones, and that sickbay is running later than the mess hall. It's happening all over the ship, too, as Chakotay tells Janeway in her ready room, and it's getting worse. A bit of a wobble in front of them prompts Chakotay to suggest that we should try using the new souped-up force fields that Janeway's been working on. While they do that, B'Elanna and Seven are investigating the source of the problem in the Jeffries tubes of whichever Deck 4 we're referring to at this point. B'Elanna opens the panel that Seven was fiddling in 5 years ago before she died for the 3rd time. Fucking time travel. Seven can see the time bomb sitting there, explaining to B'Elanna that her Borgmentations let her see space-time wibblies, just not the one that happened when playing ping-pong, because reasons. They report the time bomb to Janeway, who orders Kim to teleport it off the ship. He can't get a lock, of course, because time wibblies. Speaking of time wibblies, Not Braxton's underling and another timeship crew member time teleport over to Voyager. The event is detected on the bridge, and the reading causes Janeway to remember an identical reading some 5 years ago on the same deck, back before Voyager was launched. Bollocks to all that, though, as Voyager's falling apart. Janeway tells everybody to abandon ship as underling and other crew find Seven. They grab her and time teleport away, before Voyager does a wibbly sky blue kaboom. Back on the good ship Time Bollocks, underling is bringing Seven to Not Braxton. Again, I guess. Not Braxton introduces himself to her as Captain Braxton. This pisses me off for 2 reasons. Number 1, that buggers up my whole naming convention when I'm already halfway through the sodding script. Number 2, that's not Captain fucking Braxton. Not unless the joke I made a whole 2 seasons ago about him colouring his hair was on the money. He's had cosmetic surgery to boot, but the uniform looks more comfortable now at least, so there's that. Not Braxton, which I'm keeping by the way because bollocks to this guy, explains the situation to Seven. They're from the Future Federation, she's on a timeship, and Voyager has a time bomb on it planted by an unknown party. Underling says her Borgmentations are better at finding space-time wibblies than their sensors, which raises some real interesting questions about whether they should be cocking about with time, but let's ignore that for now. Oh, and they recruited her twice before, which is odd, as I'm sure Underling said earlier that this would be her 4th jump. Maybe it'll be explained later. Edit. It was not explained later. Seven gets down to business and asks if they have any leads. Underling mentions the Kazon, not because he thinks they planted it, but because Voyager would have been too otherwise engaged to notice an intruder when they were under attack. He suggests whoever really did it could have done so during that time. Not Braxton says this will be the 3rd time she's been removed from her time frame, and a 4th could cause side effects, one of which being the sensory wibbly she told the doctor about earlier, so we'll be doing some more, I guess. Seven's given a little training on the different types of time fuckery by Underling before we go to a simulation of Voyager to try and get some practice in. Not Braxton brings her up to date with her previous attempts, telling her where the time bomb is but explaining that she failed to disarm it previously, so stopping whoever plants it will be the smart choice. He also gives her a gun with free rein to do some pooping if she likes. Lastly, he tells her to keep clear of Janeway as she's a right bugger for getting in the way of plans. He blames her for being stranded in the 20th century for 30-odd years, which isn't entirely fair given that he tried to murderize Voyager first. It also isn't what Braxton said at the end of that story, but it's time bollocks, innit? Seven suggests Janeway might be useful, but Not Braxton is entirely against it and orders her to avoid, which is pretty ambitious when Seven isn't Starfleet. From the way she answers, it sounds like Seven understands this too. It's mission time, and Seven's getting a flashy thing waved over her face jewellery so it disappears. This is stealthy, if you're willing to ignore the completely different gun design hanging from her hip in plain sight. Underling gives some commands and we get ready to do time shenanigans. As an aside, is Underling the first officer? He seems to have a lot of authority for just a lieutenant. Voyager's under attack by a couple of Kazon. Seven time teleports aboard and goes for a poke around. I'd have probably put her straight into the Jeffries tube myself, what with everybody on the ship having had nearly a year to learn each other's faces by now, but there we are. Janeway calls engineering to find out if we can leg it yet, and we see Seven moving to that door in the background. Engineering's still on Deck 4 in this episode, then. Up on the bridge, Seven's arrival has been noticed. Well, not exactly. Kim detects something and mentions it, with Janeway recognizing it's the same Wibbly she investigated back before Voyager was launched. As Seven's popping open the panel to discover the time bomb isn't there yet, Voyager's managing to leg it from the Kazon. Now they're no longer in danger, Janeway turns her attention to those readings and orders the whole section to be sealed with force fields, while she and Tuvok go for a look. Seven notices what's happened and asks Underling what to do, or would have done if the field wasn't blocking communications, half of it anyway, as Not Braxton and company can still hear her but can't respond. Feels like it should be the other way around based on relative power of transmitters, but what do I know? Either way, she's on her own. There's not much point waiting here, so she leaves the Jeffries tube, only to be stopped by two force fields and a Janeway. They have a bit of a natter, Not Braxton overhearing the whole thing and getting more and more annoyed by the information Seven chooses to share. He orders Underling to pull her out, but that's something they can't do because of the force fields. Seven manages to convince Janeway she's legit, not with hard data, but by appealing to her trust. The force field is dropped and Seven calls Not Braxton to report. He's proper fuming and wants to scrub the whole thing, though Underling manages to convince him otherwise, and Seven sets off to find the intruder, with the help of Janeway. They arrive back at the panel to find someone's already there, and with a shiny time bomb. The bomber in question is Captain Not Braxton from the future, and instead of just shooting the bastard, we stop for a chat. That gives him time to turn on the bomb, so pooping is now not an option. Not Braxton over on the good ship Time Bollocks calls to ask what's happening, and is informed that the bomber is future Not Braxton. He's gone a bit murder-happy, apparently one of the potential side effects from too much time shenanigans. Future Not Braxton tries to explain to Not Braxton that Janeway's a proper arsehole who's going to be responsible for his career going down the shitter, and the way to solve that is by making Voyager not exist so they can't do all the stuff that he has to repair. Not Braxton asks Underling if he can teleport future Not Braxton out. The answer's no, perhaps because Underling is paying more attention to the possibility of a promotion. Not Braxton's going to be a future criminal, and that's enough for Underling to take command and lock the bastard up, gaining a pair of pips into the bargain. Captain Underling tells Seven to grab future Not Braxton, and Tuvok's finally arrived to outflank him too. Future Not Braxton decides it's time to scarper, and scarpers through time. Seven tells Captain Underling, who manages to track future Not Braxton to 2 years before where they are now. Seven wants to follow, and despite being reminded how risky a whatever number jump this is now would be, insists on being the one to do it. Seven appears in a corridor and has a bit of a stumble. All this jumping around is taking it out of her. It would appear we're back at the shipyards with Janeway being shown around. Future Not Braxton tears towards them with his gun out, and Janeway drags the Admiral out of the way. Seven arrives and tells everybody to take cover before pooping at him, but the shot goes wide. Janeway orders the deck locked down, and future Not Braxton bounces off a force field as Seven catches up with him. She's still not feeling great though, and another bout of wonky eyesight prevents her from stopping him as he time teleports away. Seven tells Captain Underling what's happened, and we learn that future Not Braxton has jumped forward 5 years, meaning he's in current Voyager, from our point of view anyway. Janeway and the Admiral turn the corner with guns drawn, and Seven decides leaving would be wiser than trying to explain. We're back to the ping-pong game, only this time it's interrupted by future Not Braxton with a gun. Seven arrives and poops yellow on him, though future guns must be shit as he seems fine with it. Another shot takes the time teleporter out of his hands, and he buggers off as Seven decides she's had her fill. Seven walks over to check on her, and Seven tells Seven that the guy who just ran through is a wrong'un and she needs to stop him. Seven watches as Captain Underling time teleports the incapacitated Seven away before giving chase to Future Not Braxton. The chase is short and ends with Future Not Braxton trapped between Seven, Janeway and Tuvok. Janeway recognises him, which is impressive given that he has a completely different face, and Seven calls Seven to ask how things are going. She reports success to herself, and Future Not Braxton is time teleported over to the good ship Time Bollocks to get stuffed in a cell with himself. Janeway has questions for Seven. They'll have to wait though as Captain Underling time teleports Janeway over. See, Seven jumping all over the shop has caused one or two oopsies, and they need someone to fix them. As Janeway keeps managing to get involved in time shenanigans without being invited, she might as well be the one to go and sort out the mess. That involves stopping Future Not Braxton during his first visit to Voyager, removing the need for Seven to be there at all and erasing those time shenanigans. Janeway wants to know how that's possible when Future Not Braxton is already here and in custody, but Captain Underling waves it away rather than try to explain it. To be fair, that's probably the right choice. Future Not Braxton tells us the best time to stop him in exchange for a good word during his sentencing, and Janeway uses it to nab him when he first visited Voyager during the Kazon attack. With the timeline largely restored, Captain Underling tells Janeway and Seven that they'll be returned to, and rejoined with, their current selves. He's also fine with them keeping their memories as they're only from past events, though he does tell them to keep stum about all of this. Lastly, he warns them that Not Braxton was right about Voyager getting involved in far too many time shenanigans, an opinion I've held myself for the last 5 seasons. He suggests they should probably try and avoid them in their future, as they're time teleported away. I've said in previous time travel episodes that the one show to consistently do it right is Doctor Who. The reason that works is because it generally chooses to ignore all the causality bollocks and just enjoy itself. I was pleasantly surprised then to discover this episode of Voyager largely adheres to the same formula. Okay, we go back at the end to clear some stuff up, but none of why that doesn't interact with other things, or how those original changes didn't cause paradoxes, is ever explained, and the story is better for it. If it's a choice between 45 minutes of pseudoscience bollocks that doesn't really add up, or 45 minutes of just having fun with it, I'll take door number 2 every time. And this is fun. It's just the right level of action and drama without taking itself too seriously. Everybody puts in solid work and the story moves along swiftly enough to keep us all entertained. And that's coming from someone who regularly professes a general dislike for time travel stories in Trek, so you should probably consider that to be high praise. There is one relatively incidental point that I'd like to talk about in a little more detail. When Seven's vision goes a bit dodgy, she leaps to the conclusion of a serious condition based on her own research. Whilst it could be a simple misdiagnosis, there's also a nod to her still being uncomfortable with her own fragility now that Borg magic brain healing is no longer available, something we saw previously in the Season 4 episode Revulsion, when she referred to herself as having become weak after being injured. It's also likely inspired by the then emerging trend of people self-diagnosing on the internet, a story that was starting to get a bit of traction as online access became more widespread. That certainly fits the pattern of Trek taking direction from current events. Before we end, let's give some points to the continuity people. During the Kazon attack, Paris is still a lieutenant, and so is Tuvok. And Janeway's hair manages to be period-specific throughout the episode too. We do have to take a couple of those points back, of course. The earlier stumble over how many jumps Seven's already made could be argued away with time travel wankery, I guess, but it's still clumsy. The far bigger culprit is not knowing what deck engineering is on after 5 years of making the show. Interestingly, it's a similar issue to the one we saw in Macrocosm. In that, Janeway was on deck 4 and decided to go and get a gun, popping out in engineering 7 floors below to grab one. Perhaps that particular Jeffries tube set has somehow managed to be labelled as both Deck 4 and Engineering, leading to the confusion. When sets get reused as regularly as they do in Voyager, many of which were designed to be modular for just that purpose, I can see how a hastily scrawled note on the back might have caused such a problem. End of episode.
Where does the smoke go?
What?
The smoke from cooking, where does it go?
Well, I imagine it gets filtered in the vents.
It can't do, can it? If there were filters in the vents, that cheese what Neelix made wouldn't have nearly blown up the ship, would it? So where does the smoke go?
We're on a ship filled with supernatural beings that...
23.
What?
It's not filled, there are 23. We've had this conversation.
Whatever. My point is you're on a ship with actual ghosts, where everything is powered by magic. You've swapped bodies with a computer. You're talking to a copy of yourself with no face, inhabited by an AI. We're both literal cartoons, and the thing that bothers you most is where the smoke from Neelix's Shadrakon goes?
It doesn't bother me, I just wanted to know.
Why?
I thought we could poison Tom Paris with it.
Oh. I'll ask around and see if I can find out.
Good lad. Woof.